The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across Tom's cluttered desk as he stared at his computer screen, trying to focus on the reports for his freelance project. A loud coo suddenly broke the tranquil silence of his small apartment, jarring him from his thoughts. Startled, he looked up just in time to see a pigeon landing on his windowsill, its feathers ruffled and its eyes darting around as if it had a purpose. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. What on earth? Tom murmured, setting aside his work. He had lived in this apartment for years and never once had a bird come knocking. Tom stood up, peering curiously out the window, feeling a mix of intrigue and surprise. Pigeons were common in the city, but one on his window? That was unusual. As he approached, the pigeon seemed to settle, shifting its weight and letting out another soft coo. Then, Tom noticed something that made his heart race, a small, tightly rolled note tied to the bird's leg. "Is that a note?" he whispered to himself, excitement bubbling up inside him. He had read stories about carrier pigeons delivering messages, but he never thought he would see something like this in real life. Tentatively, he opened the window, the fresh air brushing against his face, mingling with the musty scent of his apartment. "Hey there, little buddy," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The pigeon didn't seem frightened, it merely shifted its weight again, and Tom reached out, carefully untying the note. As the last bit of string fell away, the pigeon stood still, watching him with what seemed like keen interest. Tom held the note gingerly, his heart racing with anticipation. What could it possibly say? He unfolded the paper, and his eyes scanned the handwriting. The word struck him like a bolt of lightning. "Help me. I'm in danger. Call for help." A chill ran down Tom's spine as the reality of the message sank in. This wasn't just some random note, this was a cry for help. His instincts kicked in, and the feeling of dread settled in the pit of his stomach. Who needed help? Was the pigeon simply a messenger, or was it an extension of someone's desperation? He felt a rush of adrenaline course through his veins, pushing him to act quickly. Without thinking twice, he grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his hands shaking as he explained the situation to the dispatcher. "A pigeon landed on my window with a note saying someone is in danger. I don't know what to do." His voice trembled, uncertainty creeping in as he realized how crazy it sounded. But as he spoke, he felt a resolve building within him. This was a chance to help someone in need, to do something that mattered. As he hung up, Tom glanced back at the pigeon, which remained perched on the sill, seemingly unfazed by the chaos unfolding. What did you get yourself into? He wondered aloud, sensing that this bird was somehow at the center of something much larger than itself. There was an urgency in the air, and the weight of the moment settled heavily on Tom's shoulders. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The city outside his window bustled with life, unaware of the dramatic turn of events that had just unfolded in his small apartment. With his heart pounding, Tom decided to take matters into his own hands. He grabbed a jacket and headed out the door, determined to follow the trail of the note. He had to know what danger lurked beyond his walls, and he couldn't ignore the call for help. The sun blazed overhead as he stepped onto the busy street, the sound of traffic and chatter filling his ears. He felt a mix of determination and fear. He was about to embark on a journey he never expected, one that could change everything. Tom quickly made his way to the nearest park, where he hoped to find the source of the note. The park was filled with people enjoying their day, children playing, and couples walking hand in hand. But he couldn't focus on any of that. His mind was racing with thoughts of who needed help and why. He scanned the area, searching for any sign of trouble, but the park appeared ordinary. As he walked further into the park, his eyes darted around, trying to pick up on anything unusual. And then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a young woman sitting alone on a bench, her expression troubled. She was holding her phone tightly, glancing around as if she were waiting for someone. Something about her demeanor struck him. Could she be the one in danger? Tom approached her cautiously, unsure of how to start the conversation. "Excuse me, are you okay?" he asked gently, trying to gauge her reaction. The woman looked up, startled at first, but her expression softened when she saw the concern in his eyes. I don't know, she stammered, her voice trembling. I'm just waiting for my friend. We were supposed to meet, but I haven't seen her. His instincts told him there was more to the story. Did something happen? Are you in danger? Tom pressed, feeling the urgency rising again. She hesitated, glancing around nervously before finally speaking. I think someone's been following me. I've felt it for days, and now my friend is late. I'm scared. Tom's heart raced. This was it. The note on the pigeon had been a warning, a sign that something was very wrong. Okay, let's get you somewhere safe. We can call for help together, he suggested, feeling determined to protect her. As they walked towards a nearby cafe, Tom's mind raced with thoughts of the pigeon and the message it carried. He couldn't help but wonder how many others were out there, facing their own struggles, hidden from view. The world felt much bigger and more complicated than he had ever realized. Inside the cafe, Tom ordered 2 drinks while the woman sat at a table, visibly shaken. He brought the drinks over, trying to provide comfort. What's your name? He asked, hoping to create a connection. Lena, she replied, her voice still trembling. Thank you for helping me. Of course, Lena. You're not alone. I promise we'll figure this out. As they spoke, Tom noticed how tense she was, glancing around nervously. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Suddenly, he caught sight of a figure standing outside the cafe, watching them intently. The man looked familiar, but Tom couldn't place where he had seen him before. The feeling of unease washed over him. What is it? Lena asked, noticing the shift in his demeanor. Just stay close, he whispered, eyes fixed on the stranger outside. Tom's protective instincts kicked in as he realized that this could be the person who had been following her. In a flash, Tom grabbed Lena's hand. We need to leave now, he urged, and they dashed out of the cafe, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The man outside spotted them, his expression shifting from curiosity to determination as he began to follow. They ran down the street, weaving through crowds, Tom's mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. He had to keep Lena safe, but he was also aware that they might need to call the police if they couldn't shake their pursuer. Where do we go? Lena panted, glancing back over her shoulder. Let's head to the park, Tom replied, hoping that the more open space would allow them to lose the man. The park was only a few blocks away, and they could find safety in numbers. As they sprinted toward the park entrance, Tom's heart pounded in his chest, not just from the physical exertion but from the weight of the situation. He glanced back and saw the man getting closer, and dread settled in his stomach. We're almost there, he encouraged, pushing Lena to keep going. They burst through the park gates, and Tom's mind raced as he scanned the area for help. He spotted a group of people gathered near a fountain. Over there, he shouted, pulling Lena toward the crowd, hoping the presence of others would deter their pursuer. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. As they approached the fountain, Tom felt a momentary sense of relief. The crowd was lively, filled with laughter and conversation. But just as they reached the edge of the gathering, the man pushed through the crowd, his eyes locked on Lena. Tom's heart sank. They hadn't escaped yet. Hey! Someone needs to help us! Tom shouted, raising his voice above the chatter. The crowd began to notice the commotion, turning to look at them. The man hesitated, glancing around as if weighing his options. For a brief moment, Tom felt a flicker of hope that they might be able to confront him together. Just then, a police officer who was patrolling the park caught sight of the scene and quickly approached. What's going on here? The officer asked, eyeing the man warily. Tom stepped forward, breathing heavily. This man has been following us. He's been harassing Lena. The crowd began to murmur, and the man's bravado faltered. I was just trying to help, he stammered, trying to deflect the tension. The police officer raised an eyebrow, not buying his story. I need you to step aside, sir. I'll need to ask you some questions. Tom watched as the officer led the man away from Lena, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. "You're safe now," he said gently, turning back to Lena. As the officer questioned the man, Tom took a deep breath, trying to process the whirlwind of events. Lena looked shaken but grateful. "Thank you for helping me," she whispered, her eyes shining with relief. "You did what you had to do." "I just happened to be in the right place at the right time," Tom replied, feeling a sense of pride swelling in his chest. He realized that this moment had rekindled a spark within him, a desire to help others that he thought he had lost forever. In that moment, as the officer dealt with the situation, Tom knew he had made a difference. He had taken action, and while the circumstances were dire, he had found a renewed purpose in being there for someone in need. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Tom felt a wave of hope for what lay ahead, knowing that he was ready to embrace whatever challenges came next. As Tom settled back into his desk chair, the sunlight streamed through the window, casting warm rays on his cluttered workspace. He glanced at the pile of unpaid bills and the half-finished projects that lay scattered across his desk. Life had become routine, mundane, a cycle of endless days marked only by the ticking of the clock and the chirping of birds outside. At 35, he found himself caught in the web of loneliness, a stark contrast to the vibrant life he once led as an emergency medical technician, EMT. Tom's journey into the world of emergency medicine began when he was a young man, filled with ambition and a desire to help others. Growing up in a small town, he had always been drawn to the idea of making a difference, and his experiences witnessing local emergencies shaped his career path. After completing his training, Tom was filled with enthusiasm as he joined the ranks of paramedics, ready to rush into chaotic situations and save lives. In those early years, the adrenaline rush of answering emergency calls fueled his passion. He thrived on the excitement of racing against time to help those in desperate need. The feeling of saving a life was exhilarating, a sense of fulfillment that kept him coming back for more. He built strong bonds with his coworkers, forming a tight-knit family within the emergency services. They shared stories, laughter, and sometimes the weight of tragedy that came with their work. Each call brought its challenges, but Tom always felt a sense of purpose in his role. However, everything changed one fateful night. A call came in about a serious car accident involving multiple vehicles. Tom and his partner rushed to the scene, sirens blaring, hearts pounding. As they arrived, chaos unfolded before their eyes, twisted metal, shattered glass, and the cries of those in distress. The air was thick with smoke, and the sound of sirens mingled with the wailing of bystanders. Tom quickly assessed the situation, trying to prioritize the victims in need of immediate care. He worked diligently, but the sheer volume of injuries and the sight of one particular victim, a young girl trapped in the wreckage, haunted him. They struggled to free her, but in the chaos, they were too late. The girl, despite their best efforts, didn't survive. The grief that washed over Tom in that moment felt like a tidal wave, crashing against the shores of his mind. It was then that he began to question his career and the toll it was taking on his emotional well-being. The weight of that night clung to him like a shadow, and no amount of training could prepare him for the loss he felt. As the months went by, Tom found it increasingly difficult to cope with the traumatic experiences he encountered daily. Each call began to feel like a burden rather than a calling, and the once thrilling rush of saving lives was overshadowed by the crushing weight of despair. Tom's relationships began to suffer as well. He distanced himself from friends and family, pushing away those who cared about him. The laughter and camaraderie he once enjoyed with his coworkers faded, replaced by an awkward silence that hung in the air. People began to notice the change in him, but Tom would brush it off, convincing himself that he was fine. He believed he could handle it on his own. Eventually, the stress became too much. After a particularly grueling month filled with devastating calls, Tom made the difficult decision to leave the EMT profession behind. He hoped that stepping away would help him heal, but the transition was far from easy. The very foundation of his identity had been tied to being an EMT, and now he found himself at a crossroads, uncertain of what to do next. With his newfound freedom, Tom settled into a quieter life. He took a job at a local hardware store, trading the chaos of emergency medicine for the simplicity of retail. It provided him with a steady paycheck and a predictable routine, but it lacked the fulfillment he once found in helping others. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, yet the shadows of his past continued to linger in the corners of his mind. At home, he found solace in his small apartment filled with memories of his former life. Photos of his time as an EMT hung on the walls, reminders of the joy and heartbreak that had shaped him. He surrounded himself with books, trying to lose himself in stories that transported him away from his reality. But no matter how engrossing the tale, Tom could never fully escape the haunting memories that replayed in his mind like a never-ending film reel. As the seasons changed, the loneliness grew more palpable. While he had tried to fill the void with distractions, nothing could replace the thrill of being part of something bigger than himself. He missed the camaraderie of working alongside others, the sense of belonging that came with being part of a team. Most of all, he missed the feeling of making a difference in someone's life. One evening, as Tom stared out of his window, he noticed a group of children playing in the park across the street. Their laughter echoed through the air, and he couldn't help but feel a pang of nostalgia for the carefree days of childhood. He watched as they chased each other, completely oblivious to the struggles of adulthood. A small part of him longed to join them, to feel the freedom and joy that seemed so distant. Despite his desire for connection, Tom continued to retreat into solitude. He often found himself sitting in silence, lost in thought, wondering if he would ever feel whole again. It was during one of these evenings that he first noticed the pigeon. The bird would often perch on his window sill, cooing softly, seemingly unbothered by the world around it. Tom chuckled to himself, thinking how odd it was to feel comforted by a bird. He began to leave crumbs on the sill, and soon enough, the pigeon became a familiar presence in his life. He named it Percy and found solace in the simple act of feeding it. However, as he nurtured this small connection, the sense of emptiness in his heart remained. He knew that a bird couldn't replace the human interactions he craved. Despite his best efforts to embrace this new routine, the lingering pain from his past haunted him. Then came the day when everything changed. The moment that would alter the course of his life arrived unexpectedly with the flutter of wings against the glass. The very same pigeon, Percy, landed on his window once again, but this time something was different. As Tom turned his attention back to the window, he was taken aback to see a small note tied to Percy's leg. Curiosity surged through him as he approached cautiously. The last time he felt this kind of urgency was on those frantic emergency calls. But now, it felt like a call to action, a chance to rediscover himself in a way he had long thought impossible. In that instant, he realized that Percy had brought something unexpected, a message that could potentially change everything. As he slowly reached for the note, he felt the weight of his past pressing down on him and the hope of a new beginning flickering just out of reach. The tension of the moment was palpable, and the purpose of this note loomed larger than life. Whatever it said could either deepen his sense of despair or lead him down a path of rediscovery and healing. The stakes were high, and Tom knew that he was at a crossroads once again, this time with an opportunity to redefine his future. The question lingered in the air: what would the note reveal, and would it lead him to the sense of purpose he had been yearning for? Tom hurriedly looked around for any signs of trouble as the note's words echoed in his mind. The pigeon cooed softly, as if sensing his anxiety. He opened the window wider, allowing the bird to perch comfortably on the sill. It was a striking creature, its feathers shimmering in the afternoon light, but Tom couldn't focus on its beauty. His heart raced as he pondered the implications of the message. Who had written this? Why would someone send a note via a pigeon? His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden honk from a passing car outside, grounding him in reality. Tom's mind raced back to the last time he had felt such urgency. It had been years since he had worked as an EMT, responding to emergencies and rushing to save lives. The memories flooded back, the adrenaline, the fear, the profound sense of purpose he had felt. But that had all changed after the incident that pushed him away from the job he once loved. Now, standing at his window, he felt a flicker of that old instinct. "Think, Tom," he muttered to himself, gripping the edge of the window frame. He needed to act fast, but he felt paralyzed by doubt. He could call the police, but would they take a note from a pigeon seriously? What if it was a prank or a misunderstanding? He couldn't ignore the gravity of the situation. The note clearly indicated that someone was in danger, and he had to find out who it was. Feeling a surge of determination, Tom grabbed his phone and began to type. His fingers hesitated above the screen as he searched for local missing persons reports. After a few moments, he found a website dedicated to tracking missing individuals in the area. His heart sank as he scrolled through the list, desperately hoping to find a match. Nothing seemed to fit. Just then, the pigeon shifted, flapping its wings and drawing his attention back to it. "What do you know?" he asked, almost jokingly. The bird cocked its head as if understanding him, and Tom chuckled nervously. But he needed more than humor to guide his next steps. He remembered that pigeons were known for their homing instincts. Could this one have a specific destination? Suddenly, he had an idea. What if he followed the pigeon? "Maybe you'll lead me to whoever needs help," he said to the bird, who seemed to puff up with pride at his words. Tom quickly jotted down the note's contents on a scrap piece of paper, folding it up and tucking it into his pocket. He wasn't sure if this was the right move, but the urgency of the situation pulled him forward. Stepping outside, he watched as the pigeon took off, circling a few times before heading down the street. "Wait for me," Tom called out, jogging after it. The bird flew steadily, and Tom followed, heart pounding with a mix of excitement and anxiety. He didn't know where the pigeon would lead him, but every step felt like a leap into the unknown. As he ran, he began to notice his surroundings. The neighborhood had once felt familiar, a comforting blend of homes, trees, and laughter. But today, it felt different. The houses loomed larger, shadows stretching across the sidewalks as if they were warning him to turn back. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant to be here, following the bird that had delivered such a dire message. The pigeon led him past the corner store where he used to grab snacks after school, past the park where he'd played catch with friends. Memories flashed through his mind, but there was no time to linger. He pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. The further he followed the bird, the more urgent the situation felt. After several blocks, the pigeon landed on a rusty fence surrounding an old, abandoned building. Tom paused, panting slightly. "Is this it?" he asked himself. The building looked dilapidated, with boarded-up windows and overgrown weeds creeping up the sides. It seemed out of place amidst the well-kept homes of the neighborhood. The pigeon cooed softly, looking back at him as if urging him to come closer. Tom hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks. He recalled his training as an EMT, when faced with uncertainty, assessed the situation carefully. The dilapidated structure could be hiding danger. But then he remembered the note. "I can't just walk away," he whispered, steeling himself. He approached the fence, heart pounding as he pushed it open. The creak echoed loudly in the stillness, amplifying his anxiety. Tom took a deep breath and stepped inside the overgrown yard, scanning his surroundings. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and forgotten memories, adding to the eerie atmosphere. "Hello," he called out, trying to sound braver than he felt. Silence answered him, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. He felt foolish for calling out, but he had to try. "Is anyone here?" His voice echoed in the stillness, but there was no reply. The pigeon hopped along the ground, drawing his attention as it flitted toward the entrance of the building. "Okay, I guess that's my cue," he muttered, following the bird as it slipped through a gap in the door. The door hung slightly ajar, creaking ominously as Tom pushed it open wider. Inside, the building was dark and musty, the air thick with dust and neglect. Tom flicked on the flashlight app on his phone, illuminating the way ahead. Old furniture lay scattered about, and the faint outline of peeling wallpaper hung limply from the walls. The atmosphere felt charged with an unsettling energy, and Tom's heart raced as he stepped further inside. "Why am I doing this?" he asked himself, feeling a wave of doubt wash over him. He remembered the note and the desperation it conveyed. "Someone needs help," he whispered, pushing through his fear. The pigeon perched on a broken chair, watching him intently, and Tom felt an odd sense of comfort in its presence. As he ventured deeper into the building, he heard a faint sound, a soft whimpering. His heart skipped a beat. Was someone really here? "Hello," he called out again, louder this time. The whimpering grew louder, echoing in the dim light. Tom followed the sound, each step heavy with anticipation. He approached a doorway leading to a small room at the back of the building. The door was slightly ajar, and the whimpering was clearer now, mixed with soft sobs. Tom's pulse quickened. "Please be okay," he whispered to himself as he gently pushed the door open. Inside, he found a young woman huddled in the corner, tears streaming down her face. Her clothes were dirty, and her eyes widened in shock as she saw him. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm here to help," Tom replied, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "I saw a note on a pigeon. It said someone needed help." He stepped closer, kneeling down to her level. "Are you okay?" She looked at him, confusion mingling with fear. "I didn't think anyone would come," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been trapped here for days." Tom felt a surge of urgency. "I need to get you out of here. Can you walk?" The young woman nodded slowly, struggling to get to her feet. "I can try," she said, determination shining through her fear. As she stood, Tom could see the bruises on her arms, a clear sign of the trauma she had endured. Together, they moved cautiously back through the dimly lit building, Tom guiding her with a steady hand. The pigeon cooed softly, following close behind as if it sensed the urgency of their escape. "You're safe now," Tom reassured her. "Let's get you to the hospital." Once outside, they hurried to the fence. The sunlight was blinding, and as they stepped into the open air, Tom felt a rush of relief wash over him. The sight of the world outside reminded him that there was still hope, still life beyond these dark walls. "Thank you," the woman said, tears of gratitude filling her eyes. "I thought I would be stuck there forever." Tom smiled at her, feeling a sense of pride swell within him. "You're free now. Let's get you the help you need." As they made their way back to the main road, Tom pulled out his phone and dialed for an ambulance. "This is an emergency," he said, urgency filling his voice. "I found a woman who needs medical attention. She's been held against her will." The young woman leaned against a tree, visibly shaken but slowly regaining her composure. "I can't believe you actually came," she said softly. "Most people would have ignored the note." Tom shrugged, feeling a sense of humility. "I couldn't just walk away. I used to be an EMT. Helping people is what I'm meant to do." As they waited for the ambulance, the young woman shared her story, how she had been taken and held captive by someone she thought she could trust. Tom listened intently, feeling the weight of her words. He was glad he had followed the pigeon, glad he had been there when she needed someone to believe her. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics rushed over, assessing the situation quickly. Tom stood back, watching as they tended to the young woman. "You did great," one of the paramedics said to Tom. "You really saved her life." Feeling a wave of gratitude, Tom realized he had stepped back into the role he had once cherished. The fear that had held him captive since leaving his job as an EMT began to dissipate. He was no longer just a bystander, he had taken action and made a difference. As the paramedics loaded the young woman into the ambulance, she turned to Tom with a grateful smile. "Thank you for believing in me. I'll never forget this." "Just focus on getting better," Tom replied, feeling a sense of closure wash over him. "You're not alone anymore." As the ambulance drove away, Tom stood on the curb, watching the vehicle disappear down the street. The pigeon, having completed its mission, landed softly on the fence beside him. He chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. "You really did it, didn't you?" he said to the bird. With a newfound sense of purpose, Tom turned back toward his home. He had faced his fears and helped someone in need. The experience reignited the passion he thought he had lost, and he felt ready to embrace whatever came next. In that moment, he realized that life had a funny way of bringing unexpected opportunities, even through a pigeon with a note. As he walked home, he felt lighter, more alive, and determined to continue helping those who needed it. Tom stood in front of the abandoned house, heart pounding in his chest. The old structure loomed over him, its peeling paint and broken windows whispering secrets of the past. He could feel the chill of the autumn air wrap around him, but it wasn't just the temperature that sent shivers down his spine, it was the realization that he might be walking into a dangerous situation. The note tied to the pigeon's leg had ignited something deep within him, a sense of urgency that he hadn't felt in years. It was like a flicker of light in a dark room, urging him to take action. As he stepped closer to the front door, Tom recalled the last time he had been involved in a situation like this. It had been years ago, when he was still an EMT, racing against the clock to save lives. Memories flooded back, cries for help, the chaos of emergency calls, the adrenaline coursing through his veins as he triaged victims. He had left that life behind, thinking he could escape the burden of responsibility, but here he was again, faced with a situation that demanded his attention. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the creaking door, which groaned in protest. The hinges were rusty and stiff, just like the memories he was trying to forget. Inside, the house was dark and dusty, the air thick with the scent of mildew. As he stepped inside, a wave of nostalgia washed over him. He felt as if he were intruding on something sacred, a place frozen in time. Old newspapers lay strewn across the floor, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling like forgotten dreams. "Is anyone here?" Tom called, his voice echoing through the empty halls. Silence greeted him, stretching uncomfortably in the air. He moved cautiously, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. The beam danced across the walls, illuminating faded wallpaper and crumbling plaster. The house had clearly been neglected for years, but there was something eerily fascinating about it, something that urged him to delve deeper. As he ventured further, he found himself in a cramped living room filled with dusty furniture. A broken lamp sat on a rickety table, its shade torn and tattered. He scanned the room, searching for any sign of life. "Hello? Can anyone hear me?" he called again, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. Still, nothing but silence answered back. Tom's instincts kicked in. He recalled the letter from the pigeon, urging him to help. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, reminding him that he needed to act quickly. The sounds he had heard earlier, the faint rustling and muffled cries, echoed in his mind. He turned on his flashlight, determined to follow the source of those sounds. As he made his way through the narrow hallway, the floorboards creaked underfoot, each step sending ripples of anxiety through him. He arrived at a door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar. Tom paused for a moment, listening closely. The rustling continued, and he could hear soft whimpers coming from inside. His heart raced as he pushed the door open, his breath catching in his throat. The sight before him was both shocking and heartbreaking. In the dim light, he saw a young woman huddled in the corner of the room, her hands bound with rope. Her eyes were wide with fear, and her clothes were disheveled, as if she had been through an ordeal. Tom felt a surge of adrenaline as he rushed into the room. "I'm here to help you," he exclaimed, moving quickly to her side. "Please, help me," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. The raw fear in her voice tugged at his heartstrings, reminding him of the many times he had been called to help someone in distress. He crouched down beside her, assessing her situation. "Who did this to you?" Tom asked gently, his voice steady and reassuring. "I don't know," she replied, her voice shaky. "I was just walking home when someone grabbed me. They brought me here, and I've been trying to escape." Tom quickly examined the ropes binding her wrists. "I'm going to get you out of here," he promised. He pulled out his pocket knife, the one he always carried with him for emergencies, and carefully began to cut the ropes. Each slice was deliberate, and he could feel the urgency of the moment pressing in on him. As the last of the rope fell away, the young woman flexed her wrists, relief flooding her features. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "I thought I was going to be stuck here forever." "What's your name?" Tom asked, wanting to establish a connection. "Lisa," she replied, looking up at him with a mix of hope and fear. I don't know what to do now." Tom glanced around the room, his mind racing. He knew they needed to get out of the house quickly before anyone returned. "We need to leave, Lisa. Can you stand?" With a little hesitation, she nodded and slowly rose to her feet, swaying slightly as she adjusted to being free. Tom offered his arm for support, and together they moved toward the door. The reality of the situation crashed down on Tom. He was no longer just a bystander. He had entered the realm of heroism, even if it was terrifying. As they stepped out of the room, the faint light from his flashlight flickered across the hallway. Every creak of the floorboards felt amplified, and he was hyper-aware of any potential danger. "We need to be quiet," he whispered urgently, leading her toward the front door. Suddenly, they heard a noise, a car door slamming outside. Tom's heart dropped. They had to move faster. "This way," he urged, steering Lisa toward the back of the house. They tiptoed through the dark, their breaths shallow and quick. As they reached the kitchen door, Tom pushed it open slightly, peeking outside to ensure the coast was clear. His heart raced, and the adrenaline coursing through his veins heightened his senses. The backyard was dimly lit, but he could see the path leading to the street. "We can make it," he said, looking back at Lisa, who was breathing heavily. "Are you sure?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear. "Yes." "Trust me," he replied, feeling the urgency of their situation. "On the count of 3, we run." "Okay," she nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. 1, 2, 3. Tom exclaimed, and they bolted through the door, sprinting across the yard. The cool night air hit them, but they pressed on, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the grass. As they reached the fence at the end of the yard, Tom felt a surge of hope. They could escape this nightmare. But just as they reached the fence, a voice called out from the front of the house. "Hey! Where do you think you're going?" Tom froze, heart pounding. He recognized the voice. It was the kidnapper. Panic surged through him, but he quickly looked at Lisa. "We have to go over the fence," he whispered urgently. With adrenaline fueling their actions, they scrambled up the fence, Tom hoisting Lisa up first. Just as he was about to climb over, he heard heavy footsteps approaching. "Get back here," the voice shouted, echoing in the stillness of the night. Tom climbed over the fence, landing hard on the other side, and immediately turned to help Lisa down. "Come on. We have to hurry." They took off running down the street, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. Tom's heart raced, not just from the fear of being caught, but from the exhilaration of having taken action when it mattered most. Finally, they reached a well-lit area with houses nearby. Tom spotted a group of people outside, laughing and talking, and felt a wave of relief. "We're safe now," he breathed, but he knew they had to call for help. "Let's find a phone," he said, looking around for someone to approach. Lisa leaned against the nearby fence, still catching her breath. "Thank you for saving me, Tom," she said, her voice trembling with gratitude. "I didn't think anyone would come for me." Tom smiled reassuringly. "You're safe now. We're going to get you home." Just then, he spotted a friendly face, a neighbor from down the street, Mrs. Collins, who often brought cookies to their house. "Tom, is everything all right?" she called, noticing their frantic appearance. "Please, can you call the police? There's someone who needs help." Tom pleaded, and without hesitation, Mrs. Collins nodded, pulling out her phone. "Of course." "What happened?" she asked as she dialed. "It's a long story, but we need them here fast," Tom replied, glancing back toward the house they had escaped from. The urgency of the moment remained palpable, but he felt a sense of triumph in knowing they had made it out. As the police arrived moments later, Tom felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had gone from bystander to hero, taking action when it counted. He knew this was just the beginning of Lisa's recovery, but for now, they were safe, and he could finally breathe. In that moment, surrounded by community and the promise of safety, Tom realized he was no longer living in the shadows of his past. Instead, he had stepped back into the light, ready to embrace the responsibilities that came with being someone who could make a difference. As Tom stood at the threshold of the abandoned house, he felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His heart raced as he scanned the facade, which had long succumbed to nature's relentless grasp. Weeds crept through the cracks in the concrete, and the paint was chipped and faded, telling a story of neglect. He took a deep breath, trying to summon the courage that had once defined his career as an EMT. The urgency of the situation surged through him, propelling him forward. "Okay, Tom, just a quick look," he whispered to himself, glancing at the pigeon that had faithfully followed him. It cooed softly, as if encouraging him. With a mix of fear and determination, he pushed open the creaky door, the sound echoing ominously in the stillness. He peered inside, the darkness enveloping him like a shroud, and stepped over the threshold, the floorboards groaning beneath his weight. The musty smell hit him immediately, a blend of mildew and decay. He flicked on his flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness and illuminating the neglected interior. Dust motes danced in the light, swirling like tiny fairies in a forgotten realm. Tom's heart thudded louder in his chest as he ventured further inside, calling out softly, "Hello? Is anyone here?" And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Silence answered him, heavy and oppressive. Each step felt like a plunge into the unknown, but the faint sounds from the basement beckoned him closer. Tom swallowed hard and made his way through the dimly lit hallway, past peeling wallpaper and broken furniture, remnants of a life once lived. The atmosphere felt charged with tension, and every creak of the floorboards sent shivers up his spine. As he approached the basement door, a chill coursed through him. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of damp earth and abandonment. He hesitated for a moment, hand hovering over the doorknob. What if he was walking into a trap? What if the person who had hurt Lisa was still here? But then he remembered the note attached to the pigeon's leg, "Help me. I'm in danger." He couldn't turn back now. Tom opened the door slowly, the rusty hinges squealing in protest. He descended the stairs, his flashlight illuminating the path ahead. Each step felt heavier, the anticipation building with each creak. He could hear faint noises now, muffled cries echoing from below. Tom felt a surge of adrenaline. This was no longer just a curious exploration, it was a rescue mission. At the bottom of the stairs, the basement revealed itself, a dim, dusty space cluttered with old furniture and boxes. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood, and shadows lurked in every corner. Tom's heart raced as he swept his flashlight across the room, searching for the source of the sound. "Hello," he called out again, his voice steady despite the unease churning in his stomach. "I'm here to help." Suddenly, he spotted a figure huddled in the far corner, partially hidden behind a stack of discarded boxes. Relief flooded through him, but he also felt a knot of fear. Was this the person he was looking for? He approached cautiously, making sure not to startle whoever was there. "Are you okay?" Tom asked, keeping his voice gentle and calm. As he drew closer, the figure looked up, and Tom's heart sank. It was a young woman, Lisa, with wide, frightened eyes. Her hair was disheveled, and her clothes looked dirty and torn. "Please, help me," she cried, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't know how long I've been here." Tom quickly knelt beside her, assessing her condition. "It's okay, you're safe now. I'm here to get you out," he reassured her. He noticed the ropes binding her wrists and ankles. Without hesitation, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his multi-tool, carefully cutting the ropes that held her captive. As the ropes fell away, Lisa's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank you. I thought no one would find me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Tom's heart ached for her, he could see the fear etched on her face. "Let's get you out of here," he urged, glancing around the dimly lit basement. They needed to move quickly. "Do you know if the person who did this is still around?" She shook her head, panic rising in her eyes. "I don't know. I was taken by surprise. I just remember being dragged in here. I thought I'd never escape." "Okay," Tom said firmly, "we need to be quiet. Follow my lead." He turned, leading her back toward the staircase, feeling a protective instinct surge within him. It felt surreal, as if he were once again in the role he had left behind, stepping into the world of first responders. As they reached the top of the stairs, Tom paused to listen. The sounds of the outside world filtered in, a reassuring reminder that they weren't alone. He needed to get Lisa outside before anything could happen. "Ready?" he whispered, and she nodded, determination sparking in her eyes. They pushed open the basement door, and the sunlight flooded in, momentarily blinding them. Tom shielded his eyes and stepped outside, scanning the area for any signs of danger. The backyard was overgrown, but there was a clear path leading back to the street. "Stay close," Tom instructed as they moved toward the entrance. Every step felt like a race against time, each creak of the house echoing ominously. They stepped carefully, the weight of fear heavy in the air. Suddenly, a noise broke the silence, a car door slamming shut. Tom's heart raced as he turned to Lisa. "We need to hurry," he urged, picking up the pace. They sprinted toward the back gate, adrenaline pumping through their veins. "Where are we going?" Lisa asked, her breath quickening. "To my house. It's just down the street." "We can call for help from there," he replied, glancing back at the house as they reached the gate. The last thing he wanted was for the person who had taken her to appear. Tom pushed open the gate, and they dashed through, racing toward the safety of the street. As they crossed the threshold, he felt a rush of hope. They were almost there. But just as they reached the sidewalk, a figure appeared at the end of the street. Someone was watching them. Tom's heart dropped as he recognized the silhouette of a man, tall and imposing. The man had a menacing stance, and as he took a step forward, Tom's instincts kicked in. "Run," he shouted, adrenaline surging through him as he grabbed Lisa's hand and pulled her along. They sprinted down the street, the man's footsteps pounding behind them. "Tom, what do we do?" Lisa panted, glancing over her shoulder in terror. "Just keep running. We need to get to the nearest house and call for help." He glanced back again, his fear intensifying. The man was gaining on them, and Tom could feel the weight of his heart pounding in his chest. As they rounded the corner, Tom spotted a neighbor's house, lights shining through the windows. "Over there," he yelled, pointing. They raced toward the door, desperation fueling their speed. With every step, the sound of heavy footsteps grew louder behind them. Tom's lungs burned, but he pushed through, knowing that their safety depended on reaching that house. They reached the front porch and pounded on the door. "Please, someone let us in," Tom shouted, panic creeping into his voice. The door swung open, revealing an elderly woman with wide eyes. "What on earth is going on?" she exclaimed, looking between Tom and Lisa. "Please, we need help. Call the police," Tom pleaded, shoving Lisa gently inside. The woman stepped back, startled, and Tom could see her face fill with concern. "Come in. Come in," she urged, quickly closing the door behind them. Tom turned to Lisa, who was trembling beside him. "We're safe now," he assured her, though his heart still raced. "Just hang on a little longer." The elderly woman moved to grab her phone, her hands shaking. "What happened? Who were you running from?" As Tom began to explain, he could hear the faint sound of footsteps outside, followed by a frustrated shout. The man had arrived at the house, and Tom's heart sank. "He's here. We have to hide," he warned, glancing around the room. The woman's eyes widened in fear. "Quick! This way," she said, leading them down a hallway. She opened a closet door and motioned for them to get inside. Tom and Lisa squeezed into the cramped space, surrounded by coats and shoes. They held their breath, straining to hear what was happening outside. The pounding on the front door echoed in their ears, and Lisa clutched Tom's arm tightly, fear etched on her face. "Please, don't let him find us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. As the elderly woman approached the door, Tom could see her resolve. She wasn't going to let anyone harm them. "I'll handle this," she said firmly, turning to face the door. Tom's heart raced as he heard the door swing open. "Where is she?" the man shouted, his voice laced with anger. "She's not here," the woman replied, her tone steady but cautious. "You need to leave this house right now." Tom's breath caught in his throat as he listened to the exchange. He could hear the man's frustration boiling over, but he couldn't see what was happening. The fear and tension were almost unbearable. "I know she came here. You can't hide her from me," he yelled, and Tom felt a shiver run down his spine. Just then, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance. Relief flooded through Tom as he realized help was on the way. The elderly woman took a step back, her face pale but determined. "You need to leave now, or the police will be here." The man's voice grew louder, filled with rage. "You think you can stop me? I'll find her." Tom and Lisa held their breath, unsure of what would happen next. The elderly woman stood her ground, her expression fierce. "You will not harm anyone in this house. Leave now, or you'll regret it." Suddenly, there was a loud crash, and the man pushed past the woman, making his way down the hallway. Tom's heart raced, and he felt Lisa shudder beside him. The fear of being discovered was overwhelming. But just as the man reached the closet door, sirens blared louder outside. The sound of approaching police cars echoed, and Tom felt a surge of hope. "Help is here," he whispered to Lisa. Before the man could open the door, the police burst into the house, shouting commands. "Freeze! Show us your hands!" The man turned, shock and anger flashing across his face as he faced the officers. Tom felt the tension in the air shift, and the man realized he was outnumbered. "You'll pay for this," he spat, but the officers quickly restrained him. Tom and Lisa emerged from the closet, relief washing over them. The elderly woman stood beside the officers, her face filled with gratitude. "They're safe now," she said, her voice steady. One of the officers turned to Tom and Lisa, concern etched on his face. "Are you both okay? Did he hurt you?" Tom shook his head, still in disbelief that they had made it through. "No, but he scared us. Thank you for coming." As the officers led the man away in handcuffs, Tom felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. They had faced danger together, but they had also found a path to safety. Lisa turned to Tom, her eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank you for saving me. I thought I would never get out." Tom smiled, feeling a sense of warmth spread through him. "You're safe now, and that's what matters." As they left the house, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. The sirens faded into the distance, but Tom knew the experience would leave a lasting mark on both of them. With the police ensuring that the area was secure, Tom realized that he had stepped back into a role he had once cherished, the role of a protector. The Pigeon had brought him here, and he was grateful for the unexpected turn of events that had led him to save Lisa. As he walked beside her, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. They would both carry the scars of this experience, but together, they would heal. In that moment, Tom knew that sometimes, in the most chaotic moments, you find your true calling, helping others and standing up against danger. As Tom descended the creaky basement stairs, his heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. Each step echoed ominously in the dim light, and he felt an electric charge in the air, as if the very walls were holding their breath. The faint noise he had heard grew louder, a desperate sound that tugged at his instincts. He had been a rescuer once, and now, perhaps, he was called to do it again. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, he turned on his flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness. The musty smell of old wood and mildew filled his nostrils as he scanned the room, his pulse quickening. The basement was cluttered with forgotten furniture and boxes, remnants of lives once lived here. Cobwebs hung like curtains in the corners, adding to the eerie atmosphere. "Is anyone there?" he called out, his voice shaking slightly. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, he heard it again, the soft whimpering sound. Following the noise, he moved cautiously through the maze of debris, his eyes darting around, searching for any sign of life. The light from his flashlight landed on a shadowy figure curled up in the corner. "Hello," he said, stepping closer. "I'm here to help." As he approached, he could make out a young woman, Lisa, her hands bound and her expression a mix of fear and relief. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and filled with tears. "Please, help me," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom's heart dropped as he rushed forward, kneeling beside her. "Oh my God, what happened?" he asked, his voice filled with urgency. "Are you okay?" He quickly assessed her situation, noting the ropes tightly binding her wrists. Without a moment's hesitation, he reached for his pocketknife, a small but reliable tool he always kept on him. "Just hold on, I'll get you out of here," he reassured her, his hands shaking slightly as he fumbled to cut the ropes. The realization of the danger they were both in surged through him. She was clearly in distress, and the urgency of their situation pressed heavily on his shoulders. As the rope fell away, Lisa rubbed her wrists, looking up at him with gratitude. "Thank you. I didn't think anyone would find me," she said, her voice cracking. "Can you tell me what happened?" Tom asked as he helped her to her feet. They both glanced around the basement, making sure no one was watching. The shadows loomed large, creating a sense of urgency. "I was taken from my apartment a few days ago," Lisa began, her eyes darting to the door as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "I was just going to grab some groceries when someone grabbed me. They kept me here, saying they would hurt me if I tried to escape." Tom felt anger boil inside him. "I'm so sorry. I'm here now, and we're going to get you out," he promised, his voice firm. They had to act quickly. Every second spent here felt like a risk. As they made their way to the stairs, Lisa suddenly stopped, her face pale. "Wait. We can't just leave. They'll come back. They said they would kill me if I tried to escape." The fear in her voice sent chills down Tom's spine. He could feel the weight of her fear, and he knew they had to be careful. "Okay, let's think this through," Tom said, his mind racing. He remembered the pigeon and how it had led him here. If he could find a way to signal for help, they might be able to escape without putting Lisa in further danger. "Do you have a phone?" he asked, hoping for a stroke of luck. I think I left it on the table," Lisa replied, her brow furrowing in concern. "But it might be dead." Tom bit his lip, weighing their options. "No worries. We can use the door as our escape route. I'll check the upstairs and see if the coast is clear." He gestured for Lisa to stay put as he crept toward the basement door, his heart pounding. As he opened the door slowly, it creaked loudly, making him wince. He peeked through the crack, scanning the dimly lit hallway. Silence hung heavy in the air, but he knew that silence could be deceptive. The sound of footsteps could appear at any moment. After a brief moment of hesitation, Tom stepped out, leaving the safety of the basement behind. The house was eerily quiet, and he made his way to the stairs leading up. Each step creaked under his weight, echoing through the stillness. As he reached the top, he could see the front door and felt a glimmer of hope. They were so close to escaping. Suddenly, a noise from behind startled him. He whipped around to see a figure emerge from a nearby room. It was a man, and his face twisted in surprise as he spotted Tom. The man's eyes narrowed, recognizing him as an intruder. "Hey! What are you doing here?" he shouted, his voice filled with aggression. Panic surged through Tom. "Run, Lisa," he yelled, instinctively taking a step back toward the basement. He could feel the man closing in, and adrenaline coursed through his veins. Before Tom could react, the man lunged at him. Tom dodged to the side, his heart racing as he pushed past the man. "Get to the door," he called out, urgency fueling his movements. Lisa rushed past him, her eyes wide with fear. She dashed toward the front door, desperately trying to get outside. Tom turned back to the man, who was now advancing, ready to throw a punch. "Leave her alone," Tom shouted, his voice rising in defiance. He felt a surge of determination. He had to protect Lisa, she had already been through enough. With quick reflexes, Tom grabbed a nearby chair and swung it toward the man, buying them precious seconds. The chair crashed into the wall, sending the man stumbling backward. Tom seized the opportunity and sprinted after Lisa, who was now struggling with the front door, trying to unlock it in her panic. "Come on. We have to hurry," Tom shouted, and with one last shove, Lisa managed to push the door open. They burst outside into the cool evening air, the weight of their fear lifting slightly. But they weren't safe yet. Tom glanced back to see the man charging out after them, fury in his eyes. "We need to call for help," Tom shouted, glancing around for anything they could use. "There's a phone in my car," Lisa said, pointing down the street. "It's parked just a bit away." "Then let's go," Tom urged, pulling her along as they dashed toward the vehicle. Their breaths came in quick gasps, and adrenaline propelled them forward. The sounds of their footsteps echoed, mingling with the pounding of their hearts. Just as they reached Lisa's car, Tom fumbled for the door, his hands shaking. "Get in," he yelled, and they both hopped inside. Lisa grabbed her phone from the passenger seat, frantically tapping the screen as Tom scanned the street for any signs of the man. "Call 911. We need help," Tom instructed, his voice urgent. Lisa quickly pressed the buttons, her hands trembling. The line connected, and she spoke hurriedly into the phone, relaying their location and the urgency of the situation. As she spoke, Tom glanced in the rearview mirror. He could see the man approaching the car, rage written across his face. "Hurry, Lisa," he urged, fear creeping back into his mind. "Help is on the way," she said, hanging up and locking the doors. "We just have to hold on a little longer." With the engine roaring to life, Tom put the car in gear, but before he could drive off, the man pounded on the window. "You can't run away." "Get out of the car," he shouted, fury etched in every feature. Tom's pulse raced as he pressed the gas pedal, the tires screeching as they sped away. The man stepped back, but Tom felt a surge of relief as they finally distanced themselves from the immediate danger. They didn't look back, but Tom could still feel the adrenaline coursing through him. As they drove to safety, Tom's thoughts raced. They had escaped, but the events of the night would linger in his mind. He had faced his fears and stepped back into a role he thought he had left behind. He was not just an observer, he was a protector. In the distance, the flashing lights of an ambulance appeared, cutting through the darkness. Relief washed over both of them as they headed toward safety, knowing help was finally on the way. As Tom stood outside the abandoned house, the fading sunlight cast a golden hue over the neighborhood. He could hear the distant sounds of sirens approaching, and his heart raced with relief and anticipation. He glanced over at Lisa, who was leaning against the side of the house, her arms wrapped around herself as she tried to process everything that had just happened. Tom felt a surge of determination. He was no longer just a bystander in his own life. Today, he had stepped up when it mattered most, and it felt good to help someone in need. The sound of tires crunching on gravel signaled the arrival of the ambulance. Two paramedics jumped out, their faces a mix of professionalism and urgency. "What's the situation?" one of them, a tall man with short hair, asked as they approached. Tom took a deep breath, trying to remain calm despite the chaos swirling around him. "She was kidnapped. I found her tied up in the basement of this house," he explained, gesturing towards the entrance. "I heard noises coming from inside, and the Pigeon," he hesitated, recalling the absurdity of it all. "The Pigeon delivered a note asking for help. I thought it was just a prank, but it led me to her." The paramedics exchanged glances, clearly intrigued by the unusual turn of events. "All right, let's take care of her," the woman said, pulling out a medical kit as she approached Lisa. "You're safe now. We're here to help." Tom stepped back, allowing the professionals to work. He felt a wave of gratitude wash over him as he watched Lisa being carefully assessed. The paramedic examined her wrists, checking for bruising and signs of injury. Lisa winced slightly but managed to keep her composure. "I'm okay," she insisted, though her voice trembled. I can't believe this is happening." Tom felt a pang of sympathy. He remembered the fear that had gripped him just a few hours earlier when he first realized the urgency of the situation. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her that she was safe now, but the words felt stuck in his throat. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bottle of water he had stashed earlier. "Here, you might want this," he said gently, handing it to her. Lisa accepted the water gratefully, her hands shaking slightly as she took a sip. "Thank you," she said, her eyes meeting Tom's. "You really saved me." Just then, a police car pulled up, lights flashing and sirens quieting to a stop. An officer stepped out, his face serious as he approached the scene. Tom felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He wasn't sure how much information the officer would need or if he would be asked to recount the entire ordeal again. "Officer Thompson, what do we have here?" the officer asked, looking between Tom and the paramedics. Tom noticed the officer's keen eyes scanning the surroundings, taking in every detail. Tom stepped forward, eager to explain. "I found this woman in the basement of the abandoned house. She was tied up, and I think she was kidnapped. I heard noises, and a pigeon brought me a note asking for help. It led me to her." Officer Thompson raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the mention of the pigeon. "A pigeon, you say? Interesting," he remarked, pulling out a notebook to take notes. "We'll definitely want to hear more about that. For now, let's focus on getting her safe." As the paramedics continued their work, Officer Thompson approached Lisa, kneeling down to her level. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened? We need to gather all the information we can." Lisa took a deep breath, clearly shaken but determined to share her story. "I was walking home from work a few days ago when someone grabbed me. I didn't see their face. They brought me here and kept me locked up. I thought no one would come for me," she said, her voice quivering. Tom listened intently, feeling the weight of her words. He could see the fear in her eyes, and it reminded him of how vulnerable life could be. He had been so consumed by his own fears and insecurities, but in this moment, he was reminded of the importance of connection and community. As the paramedics began to secure Lisa on a stretcher, she turned to Tom with gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you for believing me. Thank you for coming for me," she said, her voice steady. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't shown up." Tom felt his heart swell with emotion. "I'm just glad you're safe now." "That's what matters," he replied, his voice sincere. With Lisa secured and the paramedics preparing to transport her, Officer Thompson turned to Tom. "We'd like to take a statement from you, if that's all right. Your information could help us catch whoever did this." Tom nodded, feeling a sense of duty to help Lisa and others who might be in danger. "Of course. I'll do whatever I can." As they moved to a quieter area, Tom recounted everything that had happened since the pigeon landed on his window. Officer Thompson listened attentively, jotting down notes and asking clarifying questions. "And you say the pigeon had a note?" the officer asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes. It was tied to its leg," Tom explained. "I thought it was a joke at first, but it turned out to be a lifeline. I wouldn't have known to check the house if it hadn't been for that pigeon. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell." Officer Thompson chuckled softly. "It sounds like we might have a real hero here," he said, giving Tom an encouraging smile. "It's not every day a bird helps solve a case." Tom smiled back, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I didn't do much. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." After a thorough conversation, Officer Thompson thanked Tom for his help and assured him that they would do everything possible to find the person responsible for Lisa's kidnapping. As Tom watched the paramedics load Lisa into the ambulance, he felt a sense of closure beginning to settle in. With the chaos settling down and the ambulance doors closing, Tom took a deep breath. He felt the weight of the world lift slightly off his shoulders. He had stepped out of his comfort zone and acted when it mattered most, and that made him feel alive again. As the ambulance pulled away, Tom couldn't help but reflect on how a simple act of curiosity, one that had begun with a pigeon landing on his window, had led to this moment. He realized that sometimes life throws unexpected challenges at you, and all you have to do is embrace them. Tom turned to see Officer Thompson still standing nearby. "What happens now?" he asked, wanting to know how he could further help. "We'll be investigating, and I'll keep you updated," Officer Thompson replied. "And if you think of anything else, don't hesitate to reach out. Your insight could make a difference." "Thank you." "I will," Tom said, appreciating the officer's openness. As he made his way back home, Tom felt a sense of fulfillment. He had faced his fears and helped someone in need, breaking the cycle of isolation he had felt for so long. Max, the golden retriever who had followed him through thick and thin, met him at the door, tail wagging, ready for their usual routine. Kneeling down, Tom hugged Max tightly, feeling grateful for the loyal companion by his side. "Today was different, buddy," he said, looking into Max's trusting eyes. "We made a difference." As they settled onto the couch together, Tom felt a warmth spread through him. He had rekindled his passion for helping others, and he knew this was just the beginning. The experiences of the day would inspire him to get involved in his community, to be that person who stands up against injustice. With Max curled up beside him, Tom made a silent promise to stay vigilant, to help those in need whenever possible. He understood now that the bond between humans and animals could lead to unexpected adventures, ones that could change lives. As the evening wore on, Tom picked up his phone and started browsing for local volunteer opportunities, feeling energized. He knew that life had so much more to offer, and he was ready to embrace it, one act of kindness at a time. In the end, the day had proven to be a turning point not just for Lisa, but for Tom as well. He had stepped into a new chapter of his life, one filled with purpose, connection, and a commitment to making a difference. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell.